Alright, welcome back, BioTube. We're continuing on with section 3, and we're going to look at ferns and their relatives, part 2. So we talked about, gave a quick introduction to the 3 types of seedless vascular plants, so we're going to look at each one of those in more detail right now. So our first relative that falls under the seedless vascular plants are known as club mosses, and these ancient club mosses grew into trees and produced forests. So our very first forests were a result from these club mosses. Now over time there are only smaller ones. The fossilized remains of these exist today as huge beds of coal. If you guys did not know that a lot of our fossil fuels would form from dead plant matter that has been compressed over many years. So that's how coal is formed. It's a bunch of club mosses. And today they are small plants that live in moist woodlands. So they've kind of changed over time. It's not really, evolutionarily speaking, they didn't really succeed in terms of growing large, so now they are smaller, and this is what they're going to look like right there. Kind of just a little average, almost like a little looking weed that we have there, but that's what your club mosses are going to look like. And the next one we have is horsetails. There's only one living genus and that falls in here, known as equistem. It has true leaves, stems, and roots, just like the other members of this phylum, and it's called horsetail or scoring rush. So I think the most important thing you need to know about horsetails is there's only one living genus, and here's what they look like. I don't know exactly why they call that a horsetail, but that is the name it has, and there it is right there. You can see it kind of has a little nub at the end of some long stem that it has there. So that is our horsetails. And our next one are the ferns. Ferns probably evolved 350 million years ago when club moss forests covered the earth, and these ferns thrive in wet areas with little light. I went to Costa Rica, and growing in the understory of a lot of the forest, there's a lot of big ferns, a lot of big fern trees, and they thrive there because it rains all the time and it's wet, and the bigger trees block out a lot of the sunlight, so they're able to grow and be successful. So I saw that firsthand, how ferns can thrive in wet areas with little light. Here's what a fern looks like. The left is kind of a younger developing fern that hasn't quite sprouted out yet, and the one on the right is the fern that is full grown right there. So we're going to look a little more in depth at the fern since they are the most famous example. They have vascular tissue, they have strong roots, they have underground stems called rhizomes. So right there at the top, right below where the fronds go into the ground, that's where the rhizomes are going to be, right below the root, or right above the roots, and their leaves are known as fronds, is how you say that, frond. So these are the fronds right here. And so that is the basic structure. We have a frond, root, and rhizomes, as well as, again, we have our leaves and our stems going up as well, but these are just some important terms in terms of ferns. So now we're going to look at the life cycle of the ferns. Ferns and other vascular plants have a life cycle in which the diploid sporophyte is the dominant stage. So we looked at the mosses, and their dominant stage was the gametophyte. So now we have the fern dominant life cycle is in the sporophyte. And so fern sporophytes develop haploid spores on the underside of their fronds and structures called sporangia. So sporangia, we've heard that before with the fungi, and those are again just going to produce spores, and sporangia are grouped into clusters called sori. So a bunch of sporangia are going to make up a sori, and sporangia produce spores. So here's what this looks like. As you can tell, there's the underside of the frond right there, and then we got a zoomed up image, and we can see all the sporangia, these individual red dots. Each one of those is a sporangia, and this entire structure is known as a sori or a sorus. So that is part of their life cycle right there. And then here is our chart, kind of similar to what we have with the mosses. So we'll go over each step here. We'll list it out, or we'll go with the list for now, and then maybe come back. So the first step is when spores germinate, they develop into haploid gametophytes. So going back, step 1 right here, spores is up right at the top right of the orange, and then we have a young gametophyte. So the gametophyte first grows a set of root-like rhizoids. So rhizoids growing is the first step after the gametophyte grows up, and then it flattens into a mature gametophyte. So this picture right here, this is what a mature gametophyte looks like. Almost looks like a big lettuce leaf is what it looks like in that picture. And then the gametophyte grows independently of the sporophyte, so they're separate, they don't need one another at first. And then the antheridia and archegonia, which are going to be our male and female, our sperm and our egg producing structures, are found on the underside of the gametophyte. So we have our gametophyte, which is flipped over, and we have little zoomed in images of each one here of the antheridium and the archegonia, so those are each on the underside of our mature gametophyte. Then fertilization requires water. Again, this is kind of still going back to our ancient roots that plants did come from water, are all aquatic areas at once because their life cycle still requires the sperm to swim to the eggs with water. So here is again another recap of that, and we're going to get to our second part here. So the diploid zygote, which is formed by fertilization after the sperm and the egg come together right here, fertilization. As a sporophyte it develops into a sporophyte. As a sporophyte grows, the gametophyte withers away. So we'll go down here. So we have the sporophyte growing, and move that out of the way, and we have a gametophyte right here, and as you can see the sporophyte is growing larger, and then we have up here the mature sporophyte with no gametophyte, so the gametophyte has completely withered away and died. And then fern sporophytes often live for many years, and in some species fronds die in the fall, but the rhizomes live through the winter and produce new leaves in the spring. So that is it for the fern life cycle. Let me know if you have any questions.